I couldn't verify the exact claim that Clark broke 14 world records, so I rewrote this around confirmed Team USA and FIBA results from Puerto Rico. What do you do after months away from competitive basketball? If you are Caitlin Clark, you step onto the floor for your first senior Team USA tournament and immediately make it look like the game has been waiting on you. That is what Puerto Rico felt like. Not a slow return, not a quiet ramp-up, and definitely not a player trying to simply survive her first international run with the senior team. It felt like a player showing up to a new stage and making the whole event move to her rhythm almost instantly. Team USA went 5-0 in the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan. And by the time it was over, Clark had been named the tournament's TISA MVP after averaging 11.6 points, a tournament best 6.4 assists, and the best average efficiency mark on the American roster. FIBA basketball. That is what makes this run so fascinating. Clark was not just returning to play. She was making her senior national team tournament debut for the United States, which is a very different thing. This was not a youth level event and not a symbolic appearance. These were real qualifying games, real scouting reports, real defensive game plans, and real pressure attached to every possession. FIBA's own coverage framed her first game as an eagerly anticipated debut, and she answered it with a kind of stat line that immediately forced everyone to stop talking about the build-up and start talking about the production. In her first game against Senegal, Clark had 17 points and 12 assists in just 19 minutes. FIBA described the 12 assists as a near-record number in qualifying tournament history, and that is exactly how it looked on the floor too. FIBA basketball. The biggest thing was not even the raw number itself. It was how she got there. Clark did not pile up assists by pounding the air out of the ball or forcing spectacular passes just to create a highlight reel. She got there because she saw everything early. Pressure came, and she attacked it before it could settle. Teammates cut, and she found them before defenders were fully set. Transition chances opened, and she turned them into instant offense. Her debut against Senegal was not impressive because it was loud. It was impressive because it was clean. She gave Team USA 12 assists in 19 minutes, and FIBA's tournament stats show that she finished the entire event leading Team USA in assists per game. That tells you the debut was not a one-night trick. It was the opening chapter of the whole tournament. FIBA basketball. And that is where the coaching conversation comes in. Because this source text tries to turn the story into a dramatic mystery around Kara Lawson suddenly disappearing. The verified version is more straightforward. USA Basketball officially announced Lawson as the head coach of the tournament, with Nate Tibbetts, Stephanie White, and Natalie Nakase on the coaching staff. Then, during the event, Tibbetts stepped into the lead role after Lawson left Puerto Rico early for responsibilities tied to the upcoming NCAA tournament. Ryan Howard specifically said Tibbetts had gone from assistant to head coach in the short turnaround after Lawson had to depart after 2 games. So no, there is no verified evidence here that Lawson goes to the bench or was quietly removed over Clark. What is true is that the coaching dynamic changed mid-event, and fans noticed a difference in how the team looked once it happened. SI, that difference is where the real basketball story lives. Once Tibbetts was leading from the sideline, Team USA started looking faster, more aggressive, and more comfortable playing with pace. Against New Zealand, Clark made her first start and had 14 points and 6 assists in a 101-46 blowout. Against Italy, the Americans won 93-59. Those 2 wins mattered not just because they were lopsided, but because the team looked more fluid. The ball moved quickly, the floor opened up, and Clark's playmaking became easier to feel possession after possession. The scoreline against New Zealand was especially striking because it showed how dangerous Team USA could be when the game became more open and more guard-driven. SI, that does not mean the first version of Team USA was broken or that Clark was being sabotaged. It means what it usually means in real basketball. Teams evolve during tournaments. Coaches learn what combinations work, who needs more on-ball reps, how much pace the group can sustain, and which players unlock the best version of the offense. Puerto Rico became a very public example of that process. Clark's style is built around anticipation, tempo, spacing, and early reads. The more Team USA leaned into those qualities, the more dangerous the offense became. That is not a conspiracy. That is a team discovering its best shape through actual games. SI, and once the tournament ended, the overall numbers made the picture even clearer. FIBA's official MVP recap noted that Clark posted the best average efficiency for Team USA at 14.6, was a team's second leading scorer at 11.6 points per game, and recorded a tournament-best 6.4 assists. USA Basketball's own player page confirms the 5-0 record and her team-high 6.4 assists. Those are not selective stats pulled to tell a convenient story. Those are the core numbers FIBA and USA Basketball themselves used to summarize her event. When the official recap says you made an instant impact in your first senior tournament and then gives you the MVP award, the debate shifts from whether you belong to how central you are going to be moving forward. FIBA Basketball. That is why the symbolism of the jersey mattered too. Clark wore number 12 for Team USA, a number that spent 2 decades tied to Diana Taurasi's international identity. And Taurasi's response was one of the most significant moments of the whole aftermath. She said it was so cool to see Caitlin wear not only the USA jersey, but that number specifically, and added that she could not think of anyone better to take it and have an amazing career. She even said Clark is going to put gold medals on that jersey. Coming from Taurasi, that is not casual praise. That is one of the greatest players in women's basketball history, publicly recognizing that the next era of Team USA has already arrived. TalkSport. That part matters because Clark's entire rise has been shadowed by questions about whether the hype was moving too fast. The reality is coming line from Taurasi in 2024 became attached to Clark for a reason. It came from someone whose opinion carried real weight in women's basketball. So when Taurasi now looks at Clark at number 12 and says she is the right person for it, that lands as more than just a nice veteran compliment. It sounds like acknowledgement. It sounds like somebody who has watched enough to know what she is looking at. And honestly, that is part of what made Puerto Rico feel so important. Clark did not just put up numbers. She changed the minds of people whose minds were not easy to change. TalkSport. The other thing this tournament did was give a very strong preview of what the future can look like for both Team USA and the Indiana Fever. For Team USA, the lesson is obvious. A guard who sees the floor this quickly and this clearly changes the way the whole offense operates. She does not just give you assists. She increases the value of every cutter, every shooter, and every big who runs hard in transition. That is why people immediately started talking about what Berlin could look like when the Americans defend their title later this year. Clark's MVP recap from FIBA even ends by saying she will now look to lead the way again in the backcourt when the United States arrives in Berlin. That is a pretty strong indication of how central she already feels to the next phase of the program. FIBA Basketball. For Fever fans, Puerto Rico felt like proof of concept. Not because international basketball is identical to the WNBA, but because the same principles showed up all over again. When Clark is empowered to push the game, the offense gets easier. When the ball is in her hands early, teammates get better shots. When defenders have to account for her range and passing at speed, the floor stretches in ways that open everything else. That is the blueprint people keep talking about around Indiana. And Puerto Rico offered a compressed version of it on the international stage. The names around her may change, but the effect remains familiar. Clark makes it easier to play fast, and once a team can play fast with purpose, it becomes harder to guard. SI. The source text also tries to dress this up as if every single game was one giant battle between Clark and the people controlling her role. The reality is a little less dramatic and much more interesting. Team USA did what strong teams often do in these tournaments. It experimented, adjusted, and by the end found a more natural rhythm. Clark did what stars do. She made the process move faster. She made every adjustment feel more urgent because the best version of the team looked obvious whenever she was humming. That is a very different thing from sabotage. It is simply what happens when a player is so gifted at directing offense that every lineup decision becomes louder the moment she enters the game. SI. And maybe that is the biggest takeaway from Puerto Rico. Not that Clark is some victim who had to overcome her own coaches, and not that every big moment has to be turned into a dramatic feud. The bigger truth is simpler. Caitlin Clark stepped into her first senior national team tournament after a long absence from competitive play and immediately became the event's most valuable player. She helped Team USA go undefeated. She delivered one of the most memorable senior debuts in recent international women's basketball. She earned praise from Diana Taurasi while wearing Taurasi's old number, and she gave both Team USA and the FIBA a clearer picture of what basketball looks like when the pace, reads, and floor spacing are built around what she naturally does best. That is not just a good comeback. That is a major shift in the sport's center of gravity. FIBA basketball